The sixth generation of consoles. Man, after my experience with the fifth gen, which I'll get into at a later date with a later video, I did not think things could get any better from the golden age of being on the PS1 and N64 as a console owner. The vast library of titles and the variety that the 32-bit era established was a gigantic example of how I felt that the newer generation, the 6th generation, needed to really exceed in order to do well. But man, was my expectations smashed. They went above and beyond rather quickly. With the release of the PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, Xbox, and the Dreamcast, publications, demos, killer apps were already being touted. When you look at amazing things like Devil May Cry, there was no going back from that. They were all deemed vastly phenomenal with what was put out on display. It's as if the 5th generation was already stellar, and then I would consider the 6th generation to be supremely godlike in terms of what preceded it. There were so many ambitious experiences and sequels that came into play when I wanted to get my hands on them as a teenager. I knew that some of the better games that I was already familiar with, such as Resident Evil, Metal Gear Solid, and Tekken, were already relevant among my interests within the PlayStation library. The problem was I needed to get a PS2. Unfortunately, I was still in high school, still lacking solid income of my own at the time. However, I do remember I was still subscribed to Game Informer and GamePro. So, you could say that I had plenty to read while engaging in particular Metal Gear Solid 1 Extreme runs at the time, because that's all I had was a PS1, and I anxiously awaited to see if my mother would bring home the best present ever as we got near the winter. That dark blue box, that friggin' PS2, I was so excited, man. But back then, the first title that I've gotten eventual buzz about, and I wanted a PS2 so bad to play it, was Grand Theft Auto 3. I mean, it was everywhere. It was on frequent commercials. It was on ads on Game Informer. I used to be a pro wrestling fan. I used to watch a lot of SmackDown and Raw, so I used to see the commercials, and it was smashing high reviews, and all this proverbial hype was almost like a contagion within my junior high lunchroom, and every single person was talking about it. Man, I got GTA, I got this, I ran over a pedestrian, you know, I slept with a hooker, and it was things like this that sounded amazing at the time. I was like, I want to go into this video game and have a lot of reckless abandon, and it seemed like the perfect fit for me. People will start endlessly pelting me with word of mouth thanks to how good GTA 3 was, but thanks in part to plenty of family members having particular setups that could even rival the gaming setup that I had today, I got the opportunity to play my first PS2 game. Now, it wasn't GTA 3 as I expected, but what I got was surprisingly well done, and this was MGS2. For what it was, I'm going to have to say my experience was phenomenal. It was the first PS2 game I played. When it came to updated visuals compared to MGS1, it's like a big leg up. There were bigger set pieces, bigger graphics, a bigger musical score by Harry Gregson Williams. It was all layered with a steady upgrade that told me over the hour that I was playing it over someone's house that this wasn't going to be enough. I freaking gotta get a next gen console. I have to get a PS2 in my hands. So I waited and waited and waited patiently. I wanted more out of the games presented to me. I wanted more out of the experience. Instead of going to the pool like the other kids, I wanted to just get back in the house and play the PS2 after that lengthy hour. I knew that it wasn't long before I nabbed the machine myself for Christmas, around sometime 2003, 2002 I believe. So that's when I got my first PS2. And it was a welcome surprise, the first game that I picked up, and that was Resident Evil Code Veronica X. Code Veronica X was a welcome surprise. It made me establish my love for the Resident Evil series even further and deeper, despite my inexperience with them at the time. However, that doesn't compare to my inexperience with fighting games at the time. And I also got Virtua Fighter 4 with my bundle. Now, Virtua Fighter 4 set a high standard to me at the time. I was familiar with the series. I played it on the Sega Dreamcast. But that game right there set a really high standard. And it fell in line with my previous inquiry that everything from the 6th generation built and expanded on its IPs. And when it brought new things to the table, it was just a concentrated strain of fundamental values. And this is important. This is why this line is important, because a lot of gens so far, they lack this fundamental value that happened consistently from game to game to game. As the years rolled on, I eventually got the chance to play the original Xbox, and my friend, he was being a hotshot. He was touting it as the greatest console of the 6th generation for its outstanding graphical capability. I didn't really believe it at the time, as I didn't see the original Xbox as anything special. I was just an outsider to the Microsoft plateau. I'm thinking maybe my boredom of the original Xbox and the fact that I didn't see anything special with it was enhanced due to my friend's less than stellar library. He didn't have anything but Fusion Frenzy. He didn't have anything but Forza. I think they had some sort of racing sim. I'm not sure if it's Forza 1 or not, but that's all he really had. And I was really just bored by the time I got over there. Originally, I wanted to play Halo and Doom 3 around the Xbox's launch. I think, in my opinion, it would have been a little more lenient that way to try at least an exclusive or killer app and to see how it would have performed regardless. Nevertheless, I still had fun with the original Xbox while playing that short selection of games that he had. I will say that a few gripes that I had was the controller. I really didn't like that I needed mammoth-sized hands in order to grip this thing. It felt like I needed to be a fucking grizzly bear to hold this giant controller in my hands. But I will say, at least the original Xbox was a great stepping stone to the 360. Last but not least, here we are with the Dreamcast and GameCube, and despite the fact that I've been hyping up the PS2 to high heaven, I have played these two, but they weren't officially mine. So I did enjoy the time and dedication I put into them, but I just didn't play them for as long as I would want. I do distinctively remember, however, for Sega's last console, they certainly went out with a hell of a bang. They had ambitious projects like Shenmue, and they were revamping things like Soul Edge with a sequel called Soul Calibur. Literally, this slavered my jaw to the floor with them being such great experiences. Of course, there were some bad ones like Urban Chaos, which I won't cover naturally, but Crazy Taxi, Half-Life, playing Sonic Adventure via demo disc at the time only delighted the situation even further with me, and that I was actually having a lot of enjoyable fun as opposed to certain console generations, which I'll talk about later. My time with the Dreamcast may have been brief, and it may have been regulated to playing a lot of Shenmue for what I could, but there was also the notice of arcade perfect fighting games being on the Dreamcast, and if that's true, that is a notion that I could appreciate vastly. Last but not least, the GameCube was officially Resident Evil heaven back in the time. And I thought that was weird, considering the fact that I fell for the trope of Nintendo being this ideal kid-friendly company, and little did I expect to be blowing off the limbs of zombies with a high caliber Magnum, but this was made possible exclusively on the purple lunchbox, or black if you want to take our GameCube into consideration at the time. I did like the GameCube library a little bit more than the original Xbox, but there was still something that lacked a lot of substance than the PS2, even though I'm pretty sure that all the first party titles on the GameCube definitely kicked some ass, and they definitely had mesmerizing graphics. Just imagine it, people. Nintendo actually beat Sony in terms of graphics back then, as opposed to what's going on now with the 8th gen. I still had fun for what I played. I remember just plunking an entire night into WWE games non-stop on the GameCube we owned back then, and I really didn't know why. I was just sucked into the moment. Super Smash Bros. Also made the nights long as well. With the myriad of killer apps, exclusives, and just a swath of games that came out during this time period, this was without a doubt my favorite generation. I can see why from here. There are a ton of remasters from this era, and the proof is in the pudding. It's like diving headfirst into an endless gold mine and not being disappointed with what you find as a gamer, since there's so many flavors to choose from that the 6th gen has provided us. Also, no crappy DLC tactics or slicing the game in half or any of that bullcrap. If the devs had to release a expansion pack, they would definitely do so, and it would definitely be serviceable to our needs. It was just good, wholesome fun for now.
I smell shit.